Arcade beat 'em ups. You know them, and if you're like me, you love them. The late 80s and early 90s was the era that was defined by the beat 'em up, and most of the classic entries in the genre were produced during this time frame. The Simpsons, X-Men, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and Final Fight, to name a few. However, broadening the scope beyond the familiar license-based hits leads to a multitude of lesser-known yet equally high-quality brawlers. My personal favorites of these slightly obscure titles is the topic of today's review: Knights of the Round and Captain Commando, both of which were published and developed by Capcom.
Knights of the Round, like the title suggests, focuses on the story of the mythical knights of the Arthurian legend. Due to this, Knights of the Round deviates from the traditional fists and feet style in favor of sword-slinging hack-and-slash action, which is a nice change of pace.
This game was right up my alley from the get-go. I've always been fascinated by the stories of King Arthur and his knights in one form or another, and as soon as I saw the Super Nintendo port of this at a local rental shop, I knew that I had to play it. The SNES port came out in 1994, 3 years after the arcade release. By that point, I'd already spent hours and hours bashing baddies in my beloved Streets of Rage 2 and Final Fight. Would this out-of-the-ordinary, quasi-historical offering measure up to the expectations of a kid who'd already experienced perfection in the genre? Of course it did! I mean, this was made by Capcom in their glory years. Enough said.
The story begins with Arthur dislodging Excalibur from the stone, and then cuts to Merlin instructing the noble knights to retrieve the Holy Grail. The Grail is the key to restoring peace by releasing the world from attain the chaos? Wait a minute, that would mean that they want to embrace the chaos, which completely goes against their chivalric code. Merlin, you so crazy. Anyway, typographical errors withstanding, the story introduces the cast of characters and sets them out on their quest in an uncomplicated manner. Joining the not yet King Arthur on his adventure are two of the most well-known knights from the iconic table, Lancelot and Percival. Each character fits within the typical beat-em-up archetypes. Lancelot is spry but weak, Percival is sluggish but strong as an ox, and Arthur is the well-balanced middleman. To put it another way, Lancelot is Guy, Arthur is Cody, and Percival, my personal favorite, is Mighty Mike Hagar. Choosing the character brings up an intro card for each stage, of which there are 7 total, and then it's right into the fray. The control scheme is very straightforward and beginner-friendly. It's just attack and jump. There aren't any advanced combos or Street Fighter-esque maneuvers here. It's pretty much a simple button masher, but a very satisfying one. It does include standard special attacks, performed by pressing the jump and attack buttons simultaneously, but as per usual of the genre, it takes health from the meter. However, since the version I'm capturing is set up for free play with unlimited continues, it's kind of a moot point. On the other hand, if someone wants to take this on as a challenge by trying to complete it with minimal deaths, then there are the typical food items that restore health, only these ones can be sliced into smaller quantities. I believe the individual pieces still refill the same amount of health as the whole, but I think they just add more points to the score. One other control element that is included that I was never able to fully grasp was the ability to block. It's possible to deflect a foe's attack for minimal to no damage received, but my consistency with it was very hit and miss, meaning that the bad guys hit me and hit me and hit me some more. The odds may be stacked against our heroes, but fortunately there are screen-clearing icons similar to the cross in Castlevania to provide aid against the masses of swordmen, fat men, and soldiers. The knights can also get a literal leg up, or 4 in this case, by mounting a horse and striking down retribution from the sky. When the knight is on top of the horse, the jump button is used to change the direction in which the animal is facing. It's a little clunky at first, but it doesn't take that long to get used to it. Another trait that separates Knights of the Round from most of its kin is the inclusion of an RPG-like leveling system. Much like in RPGs, when a certain number of points is reached or a green jeweled staff is collected, the character gets stronger. In Knights of the Round, this takes the form of improved armor and weapons, which usually gets bulkier and shorter respectively. The physical appearance of each knight changes over time as well. Arthur, for example, ends up with a sweet golden set of armor and a snazzy red cape. The most radical is Percival, who starts off fairly tough looking, but ends up as a total badass. He begins with a mane of blonde hair and a baby face, but by the end, he's completely bald and sporting an epic goatee!
Now that is a transformation I can get behind! Percival, my beard and I swear our allegiance to you and will lift arms to fight all who stand in our way. I'm armed with a flimsy Green Ranger replica dagger and a power glove, and I'm ready to kick some ass! Literally some ass, because I don't think this thing can do much damage, but I'll dish out as much fury as cheap plastic can handle! Yeah!
Not surprisingly, each level concludes with a boss fight. The bosses are quite impressive and would definitely take a lot of tokens to beat in the arcade. The first boss, Scorn, is a lightweight in comparison to, say, Damned from Final Fight, but the later bosses get bigger and more powerful, with life bars matching their increasing stature. The final boss, Garibaldi, has 2 full life meters and would be quite a hassle to defeat in an arcade setting, but with zero stress and unlimited continues at my disposal, it was only a matter of time before Garibaldi bit the big one. With Garibaldi defeated, the trio has finally retrieved the Grail, and they bring it back to Merlin to restore the peace that was nearly trampled in the wake of the evil of Garibaldi and his men. The ending differs depending on which character goes for the Grail. Arthur accepts the responsibility and vows to rule as king in a peaceful kingdom, even willing to sacrifice his own life to do so. Lancelot realizes that he's not the rightful bearer of the Grail and passes it on to Arthur, the man whom he has grown to admire and respect during their time together. Percival, on the other hand, is flat out rejected by the Grail. Poor Percival. You may not be a king, but you've got it where it really counts. In the facial hair department. As a fellow beardsman, you have my respect more than that punk Arthur any day of the week.
With the Grail in the safe hands of our heroes, that's a wrap on Knights of the Round, an excellent medieval-based entry that lives up to the standard of the Capcom brand. I'd only ever played the Super Nintendo version before this, so it was nice to experience it in its full glory from beginning to end. If I had to give it a rating, I would give it a solid 3.5 out of 5, but I would give Percival's final transformation in facial hair a 20,000 out of 5. I salute you and your epic facial hair, good sir. Now it's time for the main event, and a game that, unlike Knights of the Round, I did play in the arcade. And a lot.
Captain Commando.
Released in 1991 in the arcades, Captain Commando marked the first video game appearance of the titular protagonist. The character originated in the early days of the NES, showing up on boxes and manuals in one form or another. It was only natural that Capcom's mascot would receive his own starring role, and the Captain's debut outing is spectacular. There's not much in the way of a story, just an ominous figure looming over the clouds in a cityscape, but who cares about story? Beat-em-ups are about punching, not narrative tomes, so the developers wisely decided to let the fists, not the text, do the talking. In Captain Commando, there are 4 playable characters, with a heavy emphasis on character, because this group gets downright bizarre. Besides the title star, there's Ginsu the Ninja, Mac the Knife, an alien mummy, and Babyhead, a baby genius in a mech suit. A more ragtag group of heroes has never been seen before, and I love it! I'd probably go as far as saying that this is my favorite overall cast in a beat-em-up. Choosing a commando brings up a Final Fight-esque map, accompanied by a rockin' intro theme, and our character drops into Stage 1. Even though this was released the same year as Knights of the Round, Captain Commando feels years beyond the aforementioned title in almost every department. Knights may have an advantage in the form of the RPG leveling system, but Captain Commando has better, more diversified characters, a stronger soundtrack, superior power-up items, and just feels like it runs faster. All of the characters can dash in this, whereas only Percival could in Knights, which is a huge step up in my opinion. One thing that is shared between the two titles is the basic control scheme. Once again, is just jump and attack. Jump and attack again perform special moves, but unlike the previously covered release, they're unique to each character. Babyhead does an explosive kick, Ginsu performs a jumping explosive kick, Mac the Knife becomes a whirling dervish of slicing destruction, and the captain drops his fist to the ground to produce an electrical shockwave. In addition to this, the characters can perform dash attacks, such as Babyhead's flying elbow drop, and my personal favorite, the Captain's Flamethrowers of Doom! Besides the fighter's own abilities, there are a ton of weapons scattered around each stage, and the developers certainly got creative with their choices. From shurikens, to various guns, to laser beams, and even frickin' rocket launchers! That is just awesome! In addition to the weapons, there are extra items, such as this super cute teddy bear, which I'm not entirely sure what it does, and it's completely out of place, but I'll allow it because it's incredibly cute! On the complete opposite side of the spectrum, one aspect of the game that appeals to the horror fan in me is the gore factor. Knights of the Round may have had some blood, but the violence level is cranked to a whole new level here. People, good and evil, regularly get sliced in half and burned or melted into nothingness. Obviously, this is pretty tame in comparison to Mortal Kombat, but this is the most blood and guts I've ever seen in a brawler, and I love it! Another small thing that I really love is the transitions from section to section. It's a simple star wipe with a sound effect, but I can't get enough of it. The setting spans from the city, to the ninja house, to the seaport, with a fantastic timed chase section on a motorized surfboard, and culminates in the final showdown in space. The same enemy types repeat frequently from section to section, but it never really gets old or stale. I particularly love the baddies with the baseball hats. I don't know if it was an idea of the developers to add some variety, or it's supposed to be a disguise. Either way, I love it! The bosses range from Road Warrior rejects, to scuba gear wearing Blankas, to a muscle-bound freak named simply Blood. Such a stereotypically cheesy bad guy name. But I wouldn't want it any other way. Defeating all of the lower tier enemies and fighting through all of the stages leads to the final battle with the villain from the intro screen, whose name just so happens to be Scumocide. Best name ever! Scumocide is a pretty tough opponent, but again like Knights of the Round, there are infinite continues, so just spam the special and dash attacks until he's finally laid to waste. Defeating him makes the spaceship self-destruct, glass falling everywhere as the vanquished foe screams out in pain. We cut to a public official on Earth who's spreading the good news of the defeat of the super criminals. The captain makes a speech via satellite, to the surprise of the government official, who's completely unaware of the Commando and his band of awesome misfits. The captain states his identity,
Captain Commando.
And that's the end of this adventure.
I think it should be perfectly clear what my feelings are towards Captain Commando. I love it, and in a totally non-platonic way. I would have its babies if that sort of thing was possible. At the least, I'll say it's one of my all-time favorite beat-em-ups, and I would rank it way up there with Streets of Rage 2. I can't recommend it highly enough for fans of the genre. As I mentioned previously, both of these games were released for the Super Nintendo, but it was very late in its lifespan, and they both fetched pretty high price tags. Plus, I've heard there's some sort of censorship issues with the latter, so that's even further reason to stay away from it. Fortunately, there's a cheaper way to play both of these gems in their uncensored arcade form. Capcom Classic Collection Volume 2. This is a fantastic compilation of Capcom arcade hits, and it can still be picked up for $20 brand new from Amazon. If you own a PS2, I would absolutely recommend picking it up. You won't regret it. Anyway, now that I've finished gushing over some of my favorite brawlers, it's time to wrap up this episode of Cygnus Destroyer's Retro Reviews. Man, I miss this show. However, I have a session in the IUPG court that I need to attend to, but I'll be back as Cygnus Destroyer soon enough to do what I do best. Reviewing retro games. Bye everyone!
Thanks for watching, everyone. Be sure to come back on the 4th for a new episode of Innocent Until Proven Guilty, but until then, you can watch some of these older videos. On the upper left-hand corner, you've got a Cygnus Historia Retro Review Archive video. It's actually the second one that was ever made on Xena Warrior Princess, the Talisman of Fate for the Nintendo 64. So you can see my origins as a video maker. It's good stuff. You like it, hopefully. Now, in the upper right-hand corner is the video I made for winning YouTuber of the Month for December. So, thank you all again for voting for me for that. It was a huge honor. And click that video there to see my speech or whatever you want to call it, and see who I nominated for January YouTuber of the Month. So, it's good stuff. Check it out. Now, on the lower left-hand corner, you've got the last video I just did, the previous one, on Incredible Crash Dummies for the Super Nintendo. It's a good video, a lot of fun to make. I got pretty silly in it. It's fun times. And lastly, for all the newcomers to the channel, if you like what you saw, just click that red box on the bottom there, and that'll subscribe to the channel, and you'll be able to keep up with all my content. So remember, again, to come back for the 4th for the next episode of Innocent Until Proven Guilty, and until then, have a good day, week, and all that, and I'll see you guys then. Bye-bye.